Hello, guys. We're here with Zach Moore, one of our official Ketogains coaches. For those that don't know Zach, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me, Lewis. Like Lewis said, I'm kind of one of the Ketogains members now, one of the coaches in the boot camps, and I hope to, start getting more involved in the group and things like that. But yeah, to give you a little bit about my background, it's kind of a long story of how I got into all of this, so I'll try to keep it as short as possible. But I actually have a background. I have a graduate degree in applied statistics and economics, which may seem a little strange how, I got from there into where I am. But I was always active growing up. Like I played almost every sport: basketball, football, golf, snowboard, skateboard, tennis. And tennis ended up being the sport that I played into college. And I played my first 2 years in college, and I was forced to quit because of 2 knee surgeries that I had on the same knee that basically forced me. The doctors basically told me that I needed to stop playing tennis. I needed to stop, skateboarding, snowboarding, like doing things I really enjoyed. And that was really disappointing. I mean, upsetting. And so I quit tennis, and I basically stopped doing those things I enjoyed. And I kind of hit a pretty low spot. Like I got somewhat depressed. I moved to a different school, and I basically hit a point where I just decided that I was going to figure this out on my own. Like there's no way I was going to, not do the things I enjoyed. So I actually started reading anatomy, physiology. Like I started trying to study this stuff on my own. And in doing that, I stumbled across a book by a guy named Mike Robertson, and he had a book called Bulletproof Knees. And I read that, and basically the premise of it was that you need strength training, or you need stability to control your knee so that your knee can move well and it's stable and all these things. So anyways, I put the principles into practice, and it helped a lot. And I eventually found out that he had a gym where I was in grad school at. So I drove up there, met him. I became a member at the gym. I went there for a year, and I basically had no knee pain anymore. Like it was just gone. So this was around my first year of grad school, and I decided then, I was like, this is what I want to do. Like, this is super interesting. I saw how much they were helping other people. And so 2 days after I graduated with my master's, I actually became an intern at this gym. And so I did the internship for the summer, and they actually hired me after that. So I became a strength coach at the gym, and it's called Indianapolis Fitness and Sports Training. It's actually been ranked one of the top 10 gyms in the U.S. by Men's Health, Women's Health. We have professional athletes there, and just regular, soccer moms, things like that. So I was very fortunate to work with a lot of different people. I mean, everyone that came into the gym had to work with a coach, at least once a week. So, there were no TVs, nothing like that. It was a pretty serious gym. So that's basically how I got into, coaching and training people. And now I work for Precision Nutrition, which is one of the biggest online nutrition companies. I'm a coach for them. There's one thing I did not mention during all of this, kind of when I mentioned I went through my depression, things like that, is I actually went through a bit of an eating disorder. And I think that's similar to you, Lewis. But I got down to a really low body weight. I knew nothing about nutrition. And when I moved away on my own to school, I was in an apartment. I had to start buying food for myself. And I knew nothing. To me, no fat was healthy. So I started eating sandwiches with no cheese on it, and milk, only skim milk, low fat yogurts. I'd buy these Lunchables with no fat. And I started, kind of seeing my abs a little bit, and I thought that was pretty cool. And it just went into this vicious cycle, and I got really skinny. I was, I'm about 6'2", and I got down to around 125.
Wow.
125 pounds. And, once I started lifting weights again for my knee, that was something that kind of helped me realize I was in a bad place. And I started also reading about nutrition. And so nutrition somewhat became my passion through all that as well. I had to come back through some kind of messed up hormones from getting that skinny and different things, just lost confidence. So yeah, I kind of just learned kind of self-taught because of the mistakes I made myself. But yeah, that's kind of the short of it.
Yeah, I think that's a similar stories where I've seen with some of the people that really get it is because they've been there. They know, like they've been in a down place and they've gotten out of it by training and reading by themselves and teaching by themselves instead of just like following a status quo or a dogma. But it happens in every career as far as I've seen.
Yeah, and I think it makes you a better coach. I mean,
as well,
you kind of know what people go through, and it's funny because I don't know what I've seen the exact same thing, and what I see is people when they first get into it, they get really extreme, they get hardcore, they like want to find they think there's like some secret trick or some magic, and they start pushing, and then as they get more advanced, they realize like it's still about the basics. Like it's about being consistent, and I think we're going to touch on some of those things in a little bit, but just comes down to applying the main principles over and over again.
Exactly. So guys, well, this is Zach. Zach is one of our, let's say, Ketogains certified coaches, because so we do have some coaches in Ketogains. We are the ones who are running the boot camps or the personalized coaching. So one announcement we want to make is that we're having this awesome seminar coming on October 8th and 9th in Las Vegas with lots of awesome people coming. For example, we're going to have Robb Wolf speaking about therapeutic uses of the ketones for brain injury. We're going to have Defty and some of his colleagues speaking about endurance sports on low-carb diets. We're going to have the new team of Aspi Labs, which is Wilson Ryan Lowery, speaking about the latest research on ketogenic diets for sports performance. We're going to have Preisendorf speaking about the high endurance athletes that are doing ketogenic diets and all the protocols. We're going to have the Ketogains team speaking about the Ketogains method and the context of ketogenic diets. We're going to have Michael Trinchitella, that is also part of Ketogains, but also part of his own groups on Facebook, speaking about cyclical ketogenic diets, and many more speakers to be announced soon. So it's going to be a great event that you have to come if you're interested, not only in ketogenic diets, but in all its applications, and not only for strength or sports performance, but also for all that ketogenic diet has to give. So again, this is going to be on the 8th and 9th of October. Right now we are selling the early bird tickets for $99 for both days. And you also get a discount in the hotel, including buffet for both days. So you can buy the tickets directly on our webpage. There's a section called seminars. You just click there and it will take you to where you can buy the tickets. So the second announcement is that today we're going to be speaking about some myths regarding muscle building on a ketogenic diet. So we opened a question and answer section on our group last week, because there's a lot of confusion about what people have to do to build muscle on a ketogenic diet. People think that they have to train differently on a ketogenic diet, that they have to change or tweak their macros a lot when on a ketogenic diet to build. And are also very afraid of some issues with hormone imbalances or whatnot, that there are some myths perpetuated in the internet that you cannot like build muscle on keto because your hormones are downregulated, or if you have an illness that probably engages your hormones, you're also going to have a harder time or so. So we're going to touch on those topics. And Zach is going to be the expert here that is going to help us put them into context in lay person speak. We're going to try to not be so scientific, so like put down the facts so everybody can understand it. So Zach, let's start with training. Lots of people think that you have to change a lot your training when doing a ketogenic diet because you're glycogen depleted, or probably because you don't have carbs, or that you are not going to be able to train with the same strength or efficiency. So what is your experience on that regard, especially because you used to be not on a ketogenic diet before?
Yeah, I kind of had the same beliefs as everyone else, but it was, mainly unfounded, just stuff I'd heard about. Yeah, when you lift weights, you're going to deplete a lot of glycogen, and when you're on a ketogenic diet, then your glycogen, you pretty much don't have any. But you actually always have glycogen stores within your muscle, and strength training in and of itself does not deplete very much muscle whatsoever. And most of the studies looking at athletes who have been on a ketogenic diet for a while, they replete almost glycogen just as fast or as fast as just a regular athlete. So this is one unfortunate thing with ketogenic diets, is we don't have a lot of studies on strength training athletes, but just looking at the science and mechanisms, your body has ways of creating its own glycogen or glucose without eating carbohydrates. So for example, when you do some type of high performance activity like lifting weights, you create a substance in your body, lactate, and lactate can be converted back to glucose in the muscle. So, that's one argument against keto diets in regards to strength training, is that, you're not going to have enough glycogen. But when you look at the studies, it's not the case that you need that much glycogen. And if you aren't training twice a day, then within 24 hours, almost all of your muscle glycogen is back to normal anyways. So you have no concerns of needing to change your training unless you are, like I said, if you're training twice a day, it may be a good idea to look into something called a targeted ketogenic diet. Lewis, I believe you do a TKD. That can be a good idea. And you can incorporate that anyways, but carbohydrates are not needed to have enough muscle glycogen to perform resistance training. It just doesn't deplete that much glycogen, and you always have enough within your muscle.
Yeah, sure. The main thing that we've seen probably, and I can say not with everybody, just some people do experience a loss of strength and endurance when transitioning from a high carb diet to a ketogenic diet, but probably because they are used to having that much or that many carbs in their system. And this is also something that happens with people that have been exercising for a while. If you are practically new to exercising or strength training, you're probably not going to see that much of a difference because you have nothing to compare to, for one, and your body is really not adapted to anything at all. So it's going to be an improvement by itself if you start training while on a ketogenic diet. You really don't have to go slowly. In regards to maybe someone who is actually already has been training for a while and is trying to experiment with a ketogenic diet, what I would suggest is probably to do it on off season. For example, someone who is competing, because they're going to experience a loss of endurance probably, or even strength, while the body adapts. And also because here's another thing that people don't consider, is that when most people do a ketogenic diet, they do it for fat loss. So most of them will end up eating at a deficit. And then pair that the deficit with a change of energy substrate, and of course, you're going to have a loss of strength and endurance and probably feel tired. It's not only the diet by itself, but it's also that you're eating at a deficit. So let's not blame the diet by itself. Let's look at the whole picture. And the last thing that one should be adding and reviewing, what we say every day on the group, is electrolytes. People never pay attention to electrolytes, especially sodium. And if you start the diet, you're probably leaving a lot of processed food that you were eating before and changing it for, I hope so, less processed food. And less processed food has less sodium in it. So if you just eat like that, you're probably going to be a little bit sodium depleted. And sodium is super important for any kind of strain on the training, especially if you're going to be sweating a lot or training for a while or living in hot and humid weather. Lack of sodium wreaks havoc in endurance.
Yep, that's actually one thing. When I first transitioned in, I was lucky to have spoken to you, and you told me, sodium and electrolytes and stuff like that. And I already was salting my food quite a bit. And I was like, well, I'll probably add a little bit more. But no, I mean, I needed quite a bit more even on top of that. And that made a huge difference, definitely electrolytes. And you touch on a good point too. I agree. When you're first transitioning into, keto, I think it is a good idea to drop the volume a little bit. There are some, again, I don't want to go too deep in the weeds, but there are some mechanisms by which your body probably cannot produce that glucose quite as well on its own without carbohydrates, and it just takes some time for your body to adapt to that. So
practically, just because of what you touched on before regarding lactic acid and pyruvate, basically, if you're, it's something that probably we're going to talk about later, but it's the same that with exogenous ketones. If you're supplying the substrate for free or easy for the body to utilize, there's no need for the body to go into a more expensive metabolic process. So let's say someone who is doing a high carb diet, it's already getting most of the glucose it needs, and glucose is going to be metabolically processed much faster than actual fats and fatty acids and whatever, and even lactate into glycogen. So when the body, you deplete glycogen and stop feeding it carbs, it's going to take a while to start, let's put it that way, think of it as learning to use again that pathway of the pathway is there. Your body can do it, but it's not used to. It's like a spoiled child. It wants to be continuing what it was doing. Your body always looks for balance and homeostasis. So it's also always going to be looking for the easiest way or the cheapest way to produce energy. So you take out glucose, and then it's going to try to rebel for a while. And then when it sees it's not going to happen, then it says, okay, then I'm going to make my own glucose with, lactic acid, or probably a little bit from GNG, a little bit, before we go into protein turns into chocolate cake. So it's going to make whatever it deems necessary to produce or get the ball rolling again. But you have to force it a little bit. And as I say, force it is just, giving it time to adapt to the new substrate. And for some people, it's going to be faster. For some people, it's going to be lower. You cannot say how much is this going to take. But what you can do in the meantime is, as you said, probably review electrolytes, review your training, try to do it on a time where you don't have to compete. If you're competing, if you are a recreational athlete, I personally don't think it's going to be so much important. Really doesn't matter that much. Just train as hard as you can without doing anything dumb. And practically that's it. Now, in regards to some questions that we had from people in the group, specifically for training, like we have something that is not really keto related, but someone asked if stretching really necessary before a workout. As a PT coach, what is your take on that, Zach?
Yeah, so unfortunately, and you probably hear us say this a lot in Ketogains, but it is somewhat context dependent on the person. I will say that you don't have to stretch. I mean, if you get if you get your heart rate up in some way and you go through a good warm up, like on the first lift you're doing, like I wouldn't automatically go into your working sets. Like say you're doing our 5x5 program, and that day you're supposed to squat 135. I mean, do the bar for 10 reps, do 95 for 10 reps, something like that to get your heart rate up and to go through the specific movement pattern. That's what I would recommend if you're not going to stretch. I do typically recommend some type of warm up, but it's not static stretching. It's more just moving your body through a full range of motion. So we call it dynamic stretching. We like kettlebell swings and Ketogains. Again, it gets your heart rate up. It moves almost every body part through its full range of motion. There's no need to sit there and hold any particular stretch, and it can actually be somewhat detrimental to do right before a particular movement. So I would not recommend that. I would save that after your workout later in the day, just as some type of recovery activity. Perfect.
Yeah, that's practically some other things that we teach people in our boot camps. We really don't stretch. I myself have never stretched before training, and I do it. I've done it for more than 22 years. But I do exactly what you said. Either do some kettlebell swings, which are like my bread and butter before training, or actually we do what we call non-working sets. Like we do some 1 or 3 sets of warm-up that don't really count toward the actual training we're going to do for that day to get towards our working sets of the day. So for example, let's say you were going to do a 200-pound squat. Maybe I would do, in my case, 1 or 2 sets of warm-ups to get me to my working set. And that's the warm-up. That's it. That's my stretching, because I'm not going to do stretching. I'm just going to warm up the same movement that I'm going to do, that I'm going to be training with, right?
Yep. And that's what a lot of people don't realize, is that strength training in and of itself is a very effective form of stretching. I mean, if you put a heavy weight on your back and you squat down, that's probably going to force you into a lower position than just, doing a body weight squat. I mean, I know it will.
Yeah, there's a myth that bodybuilding or strength training is going to make you inflexible. And that's probably one of the biggest myths I've seen in regards to strength training. It's actually one of the most functional exercises out there, because you're working, if you're doing, of course, correctly, you're working practically all your body, and you're doing really active training for everything in your life. Like once I got, when it was in fashion to do yoga, I started doing yoga about 3-4 years ago on weekdays. And what I found out, even though I was a typical bodybuilder who didn't do any stretching, that I was quite flexible, having never done yoga before, and I can do practically all the positions. So it's a lie, if you've been strength training for a while and done it in a good and correct way, you're practically very flexible. You just have to, of course, train for that flexibility a little bit more, but it doesn't mean that you're not flexible, right?
Yep. And you could definitely overstretch too. I mean, I've worked with a lot of people, especially females, who are hypermobile. I mean, you want some stability around your joint, like muscle mass in and of itself creates some stability in the joint. So that's why having muscle, one reason is that it's beneficial. Going back to kind of my knee injury, like that's what I needed. I needed strength around my hip to control my knee position. And so, yeah, if you don't just stretch something over and over because you assume that you need to, it's just not needed.
Sure. It's like another myth that we've seen, especially today. I had with a client that they think that people cannot squat because they have an injury. And the only real time I've seen people that are unable to squat is when they are actually prescribed by a doctor to not squat. And by prescribe, it's not a recommendation, but more so that they are really not able to squat because they really have an issue there. If it's just an issue of mobility or flexing or even a little bit of pain, it's going to improve if you squat more. Mm-hmm. So people are afraid of squatting. I don't know why, and doctors are always so quick to suggest to not squat, more so I think of a safety reason. They don't want people to get hurt, so it's better to just not suggest anything that they're not really familiar with than to have them go and do something that they may be harmful for them. But from what I've seen, my experience, and I think it's going to be the same with yours, there's a lot of people who say they cannot squat, and when they start squatting, they experience that it doesn't hurt anymore, that they're able to get better flexibility on their legs. And even those that had pain in their knees, the pain is gone after a while.
Yep, completely agree.
Okay. So another question that we have here is in regards to training frequency, probably in keto or in general, about what would be better in regards maybe to, let's say, novices and intermediate lifters. What would be better? Train every day, train every 2 or 3 days, do a 5 body split, like a bro split, or probably a full day body workout. What would you suggest from experience, or what do you think would be the best?
Yeah, so again, you're going to hear me say this a lot, but it does somewhat depend. So what I'll do is I'll touch on kind of what the research shows on average for, people, but again, there are always outliers. So the main kind of variable that people look at when they're determining what's optimal in terms of training frequency is what's called like your anabolic window, or basically how long muscle protein synthesis is elevated, which is basically muscle protein synthesis just means the building up of muscle. So, we want to look at how long that is elevated after a training session. And what we see is for novices, someone who's very new to training, their anabolic window, or how long they're building muscle, or how long that's elevated, is a long time. It's up to 72 hours. So for someone like a novice, they can train, every 2-3 days, and they're going to be fine because they train that one day, they hit a muscle, they wait 3 days, their anabolic window is still open, or their muscle protein is still elevated. So it's completely fine. As you get more advanced, if we look at really advanced people, there's some indication that theirs may be down to even something like 6 to 12 hours. So in that case, it may be more beneficial to not just train more often, but honestly train a muscle more often, a muscle group. Because, if I train my legs one day and then don't train them again for 6 days, well, muscle protein synthesis backed off after 6 to 12 hours. You could have been training them again. They're most likely not growing from that first session. So I would say, in general, you should be training more often the more advanced you are, and you should be hitting each body part more often the more advanced you are. But again, this does vary. Like when we look at that, like I said, this is averages across people. So this is where it's very helpful to, one, either have a coach that knows you really well, or to start, paying attention to how your body responds to things. If you're trying a program and it's not working for you, ask yourself why. Is your recovery good? Is your sleep good? If so, maybe try switching up the variables a little bit. Maybe try training less often. Maybe try training more often. It is really hard to say, but that's where you'll see kind of the arguments come from, is that research on muscle protein synthesis.
Sure. And then this is again where it comes, as you said, on the importance of having someone that actually has gone through it and knows or has studied it. Because the biggest error I've seen is people that they want to make their own program when they have no knowledge whatsoever of how biomechanics works, for one, how are muscles connected, how the actual push-pull legs classic approach, why does it work so well, what all the muscles that you're actually working. And they just go and say, okay, I'm going to do legs, but they do, today I'm going to start with calves, and then I'm going to do some quad work or whatever, or they don't even know the names of the muscles. So they just like go and do things, whatever, whenever, and of course they're not going to see any kind of progress. And this takes us back to what I usually say on Ketogains, that I say for macros, but it also touches on training. That which is not measured cannot be managed. The same applies to training. So if you're going to do a routine, first don't switch it up every week. Like try to be consistent, like at least keep it 6 weeks or 2 months and improve upon it. Like write how much you are lifting and then try to progress every week. Because normally what I ask first my clients is, okay, how much do you squat? I don't know, 2 plates. And then what was the last time you actually increased the weight? No, I've been like doing 2 plates for 2 years. Then of course you're not progressing. Like you're not getting stronger because your body is used to that. And then you're also doing 2 plates with horrible form. You're not even half squatting. You're like just grabbing the bar and like putting it on your back. So it happens like that. So you need to know the basics, have a proper plan that you either got from the Ketogains 5x5 or by hiring a coach, or probably even there are some plans out there for free in the internet. So I suggest people to don't go and make their own plans if they don't have any real idea of what they're doing.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'd recommend. I mean, I get people asking me sometimes like, how do you write your own programs, or teach me, or, something like that. But periodization is a super complex topic. I mean, you can get a PhD in just periodization, basically. So, I mean, it took me quite a few years before the people at the gym allowed me to write other people's programs. And, you know, I understand why now, because there are so many factors that come into play. So like Lewis said, you know, find a program or hire a coach or something and follow it for a long time and figure out what works for you, what doesn't. And, yeah, just tweak small variables here and there. You know, maybe if it's having you train 3 times a week, try bumping up to 4 times a week for a little bit.
And be patient, because people are also, another thing that I've seen is that people expect results in 1 week or 2 weeks. And this is not how muscle is built. This is not how it works. For example, you didn't get fat in 1 week, so don't expect to lose all your body weight in 1 week. Probably getting lean is way faster and easier in a way than actually growing muscle, and people are not aware of that. Guys you see with a lot of muscle and a great physique, they have not been training for 2 or 6 months. They at least have 2 years of proper training and nutrition. And the ones you see with awesome physiques have 2 things. They have consistency. They are probably below 25 years, so they have all their hormones in great shape. And also they are doing the correct things. They are, like we said, resting adequately, training adequately, and probably also have a little bit of advantage in the great genes. Like there's also that thing that we need to touch on. It doesn't mean that if you have bad genes, you're going to be determined not be able to accomplish anything in the gym. It just means that you're probably going to have a little bit of a harder time and going to be needing to optimize better your training frequency or your nutrition. But that's something that you have to find out by yourself. Like there's also saying that states that there are no hard gainers or easy gainers. There are just people that overeat and people that undereat, practically. So if you are the typical skinny guy that has no progress in the gym, probably you're eating way too little for what you should be eating. And if you're the kind of person that has a lot of trouble being lean or losing body fat, just reevaluate what you are actually eating or what you are doing in the gym, because probably you are not either doing enough or probably you're eating a little bit too much or more than you should be eating. For example, I am the typical person that gains fat very easily. If I don't watch my macros, I can gain body fat just by looking at a cake. But on the other hand, to lose, for me, I have to go very low on calories. Sorry, that's how I am. That's what probably I have in my genes, and probably that's my lifestyle, whatever. But it is what makes me. But it also opens an area of opportunity that maybe for me it's easier to build muscle. So each one of us have different traits. You just have to be aware of them and then optimize your training toward that. So again, if you're very skinny, well, probably you're going to be able to burn fat faster. Like it's a hypothesis, not written in stone. But then you just have to be more wary of what you're doing, both training-wise and in your macros and food. I've seen, I don't want to name names, but there are a few guys on the Facebook group that are always posting that they're not growing. And when you look at what they're doing doing lots of cardio. They're probably eating once a day. They don't want to ingest more fat. They just want to eat protein. So that what happens is that, of course, you're not going to be building muscle with all that cardio that you're doing, and you're just overeating on protein. And then because protein by itself is bad, but there's a point of it diminishing returns in regards to protein intake. So it doesn't mean that much protein is better for muscle building. It's just that it's not going to do anything, and protein is not an efficient energy substrate. You're better off eating more carbs or more fat to use as energy. So you're probably going to the gym not being energized enough because you're just eating protein and not getting enough fat or carbs, and then your training is going to suck. And then because your training sucked and probably you're not even following a proper training approach, you're going to be lifting less than you should. You're not going to get the proper stimulus towards training. So it's let's call it a negative spiral. You're doing everything wrong and you're not getting results, so you're getting demotivated, and then you keep doing anything wrong and switching things wrong instead of just sitting back, look at the whole picture and understand the basics. And most times the basic is adjust your food, adjust your timing of nutrients, and adjust your training around it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, you hit on like an issue I see with, I guess, a fault with most people is just pick a goal and stick with it for a while. Like, commit to it. Tell yourself, I'm going to commit to this for X amount of time. No, it may not be the funnest thing. Like, if you're going to try to lose fat, go for it. Like, put all your effort in and go for it and achieve that goal. And then, then it just becomes much easier. I see so many people that don't want it to be hard and they're looking for shortcuts. And I hate to tell you, I mean, fat loss is hard. Like, it is not easy. Muscle gain is not easy. It takes time. So pick a goal, stick with it. And I just see so many people spinning their wheels, especially like you talked about skinny guys. And I've been guilty of this. I'll admit I tend to be a skinnier guy, but one day you're bulking and the next day you look a little soft in the mirror. So then you cut your calories and then next day you look skinny. So you're like, I'm going to eat everything. So again, pick a goal, go for it. That's again where it's helpful to have, an objective viewpoint, another coach or something like that.
Yeah. So sometimes you just need someone from outside to tell you it's okay. Just keep on going. Eyes on the prize. And like, people tend to overanalyze every single variable. Just another thing, topic we see on the group that is not really related to muscle building, but people get fixated on the scale. And for a thing, as you know, we have people on our groups on both in private coaching and on the boot camps. They do have to weigh themselves every day, even if they don't like it. It's a requirement, but it doesn't mean, and it's not like a punishment. More so because we as coaches look at the trend. And it doesn't matter if you gain 2 pounds in a day. Probably the next few days, if you're doing everything right, you're going to lose 4. So we look at the whole picture along with measurements, because probably you could even be gaining weight, but are losing inches on your tummy. So what this means is probably you're retaining water from the training, but you're also building muscle. So it's a good sign. Mm-hmm. And then probably, like, for example, my case, I've been weighing around 72 kilos for the last 5 years or more, but I look totally different. Why? Because I'm recamping slowly but surely. May not be optimal because I'm not a young guy anymore, and I'm also probably near my genetic potential ceiling. But again, like, being stable in weight and slowly progressing, even if I looked myself every single day, I would not see any difference. You've seen my scale pictures. Like, some days I can't even gain 3 kilos. Like, what happens? I don't know. It's like, I don't know, aliens or whatever. But 2 days later, I'm down again. And if you look at the actual trend, probably gaining a little bit of muscle slowly but steadily, and losing a little bit or maintaining my body fat, which is really my goal as right now. So don't get discouraged in that regard. Just keep it going, keep eyes on the prize, and be consistent. Don't be changing just like because you're desperate and don't know. Mm-hmm. So this takes us to the next phase of the talk, which would be macros on a ketogenic diet for muscle building. Like, if people have to, for one, eat at a surplus, or you can gain on a deficit. First, before we go into actual macro partitioning, what do you think about, or what would you say to someone in regards to, is it possible to gain strength or muscle while losing fat on a ketogenic diet?
Yes, it is possible. I don't recommend it for most people because, again, you have to be pretty meticulous with everything. Everything kind of has to be on point. But it is definitely possible. I mean, just because of thermodynamics, I mean, you can use the fat that you're burning off as energy to use for that protein synthesis response. But what we recommend in Ketogains usually, if you want something to do something like that, is usually on days you're not training, eat a little bit lower in calories, and then on days you're training, put more of your calories on that day, so that more energy is going into that protein building process, and then on days when you're not training, don't eat quite as much. So that's more of what I would recommend, as opposed to going in a pure deficit and trying to gain muscle. And then also, if you're just a naturally skinny guy, I would not recommend it in general, because an energy surplus is anabolic by itself. Like just gaining weight, you usually gain some muscle even if you're not strength training. So, and you're going to gain more muscle the more of an energy surplus you're in. But the problem is you gain more fat with that as well. Like there is diminishing returns to that. But there is some truth to that. I mean, if you really want to gain a lot of weight, like eat a lot of food. I mean, it is going to help. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Perfect. So then what leads us to the next question is how much of a surplus is necessary, because then you have the classic forever bulking or perma bulk guys that think that they can eat whatever without responsibility, and what happens is that they just like end up fat, with lots of strength probably, but you have the typical let's say looking like trainer guys that are always like strong, but they are never lean. In a way, they don't have really definition to show, because they don't know how to actually proper bulk or like a lean bulk approach. So how much do you think it's a viable surplus when doing a gain phase diet on keto?
Yeah, so it's true. Muscle building is a much slower process than losing fat. So we may link to an article at the bottom, like Lyle McDonald has an article on a realistic amount of weight gain. For a beginner, you can gain maybe 1 to 2 pounds a month. If you're more intermediate, and this is males, I should say, females take about half of that. So males, 1 to 2 pounds a month. If you're a beginner, for a novice, I like to see half a pound to a pound. And then if you're advanced, I mean, you're lucky to gain a pound, every other month or even if that. So to determine your surplus for that, it is kind of going to depend. I would really just track your scale weight. Like Lewis said, we usually have clients weigh almost every day. And you want to get a trend of what's happening. And usually I like to just take an average at the end of every week and see how that average is changing. And if you're hitting those numbers, half a pound to a pound, you're probably at around the right amount of food. If you're not gaining at that rate and you still look, just as lean, then I would bump up your intake, maybe 200, 300 calories a day, something like that, and see what that does for you.
Yeah, that's basically the approach we use in bootcamps and with private clients, especially those that want to gain weight and are already very lean. As you said, probably I normally increase them just by 150 or 200 calories a day. And on days they train, like just to review, and exactly as you said, if they gain probably a pound or half a pound in a week, I know that it's not going to be pure muscle, of course. So probably just stay on course and see what happens in 2 or 3 weeks. If they keep steady and without much fat gain, you can keep on track. If they are not gaining, just increase a little bit more, but don't go crazy on calories. But because what happens is if you overshoot and you try to eat 500 calories a day, which is a lot for most people, you're just like putting things in your mouth that you really shouldn't. Like, let's say that your TDE is about 2,000 calories, and then you're going to increase by 500 extra on top of that. Where are you going to get that extra energy? If you are doing keto, that should be mainly from fats. So you're going to be ingesting, let's say, 5 tablespoons of coconut oil or butter or whatever. I don't think it's great. First, because by itself, the fat, it's very energy efficient. You're gonna get lots of energy. You don't really need to ingest that much. And then, it's not. I don't think it's going to be so healthy just to be shutting fat because you want to gain weight, right? You better just take it slowly. Don't get desperate. Increase, like we said, probably 100 calories a week, 150 up to 200. You really don't need more. It's going to be slow, and it's going to be slower on any diet. It doesn't happen, like you said, magically. If you gain 2 pounds of pure muscle in 1 month, wow, you're a genetic freak, because it's not normal, right?
Mm-hmm. I would say the only caveat to that I would say is if you are pretty much brand new to lifting and you're naturally pretty skinny, like don't be afraid of eating, because again,
Exactly.
I see too many people afraid of gaining too much fat or something, but you're primed to gain muscle if you're, new to lifting and you're naturally skinny and a younger guy, even
Exactly.
or girl. So,
and this is part of the next topic, which I'm going to jump a little bit about, but before we go fully into it, there's a golden zone for muscle building, which is for males, let's say between 10% up to 15%. So what we normally suggest Ketogains is for you first to lower between those numbers. You're like 20%, you should not be bulking. First, cut down to 10 or 12%. So you're in the optimal range. This is where you're going to be building more muscle in regards to, let's say, or put it in another way, there's something called the fat-protein ratio. And this is determined in a way apart from genetics and training potential and whatnot, also by hormones. And where your hormones are optimally aligned, which is around 10 to 15% body fat on a male, you're going to be building like more muscle than gaining fat. So try to first cut down to around those numbers so you get like to build more muscle, because that's what you want to do. And then like, let's say, go up or increase or maintain your bulk up until 15% where your abs stop being visible, and then cut back again. You can do mini cut and bulk cycles. And the same applies to women, just women should be adding between 8 to 10 points body fat. Let's say a woman should be doing this in around at low 80%, depending on the build of the woman, up to 25% mostly, right?
Yeah.
That's like a healthy set point, let's call it, for building muscle and being lean. That's practically where you look very healthy and, cut and chiseled, like not super ripped, but you have perfect metabolic processes. Let's call it hormonal balance is up to par. Women are not going to experience amenorrhea. Men are not going to experience a loss of libido. You can practically stay in this shape all year round. You look great and you have lots of strength. If you go lower as a male or as a woman, you're going to start feeling lethargic, tired. It's not going to be optimal for muscle building because you are not going to have energy in the gym. And also you're not going to be building more muscle. You're probably even going to be losing a little bit of muscle if you train too hard. Because your body just wants to maintain the essential processes of life. So just stay between those numbers. But before we go into much detail into that part, let's talk about macros for building muscle on a ketogenic diet. As we know, protein by itself should be fairly static because we don't want it too low or we don't want it super high, not because gluconeogenesis, but again, because of diminishing returns. So why don't you explain the folks on Ketogains why is protein not like an optimal energy substrate, Zach?
Yeah, so mainly, again, without going too much into the science, our body usually just basically relies on glucose or fats for energy. So we refer in Ketogains, obviously when you're in keto, carbs are kept low. So fat is basically the variable we use to change whether, if you're going into a surplus or if you're trying to lose fat. So we always keep protein roughly the same because, like Lewis said, it's not an energy substrate. It's not something we want to use to burn. It's just very inefficient and it produces some, not so great byproducts. So we want to use fat for our fuel and we want to use the protein to build, or use what it's needed for, which is basically building things up, not just muscle, but other things. So normally we recommend around, we have a calculator on the website, so you guys are free to go to that. But normally, we keep net carbs, and you can correct me, Lewis, but net carbs are less than around 30 grams. Protein is usually, around 0.8 to 1.2 grams per pound of lean body mass. And then fat is kind of your lever that you use. Let's say you're eating 2,000 calories, or let's say you're at maintenance and your fat is at 90 grams. Well, if you want to go into a bulk, then you're going to keep your protein the same, your carbs the same, and you'll just raise your fat a little bit. And then if you want to go into a deficit, then you lower your fat a little bit. And again, where your fat intake lands, it basically depends on how active you are, kind of your genetics, and just how much you weigh. So again, that's where I'd recommend our calculator. It's just on our website, and you can just plug in your numbers and it'll spit out some numbers. And those are just starting points. Again, you want to track your weight over time, look at the trend, and make changes based on that.
Exactly. And know that you touched on the subject. Also happens that people then, for once that they, let's call it, they're afraid of cutting calories because they start getting hungry or they start feeling a little bit tired. And there's a disconnect between people understanding that when you're in a deficit, of course, you're going to feel a little bit tired. And of course, you're going to be hungry. Being hungry is part at the start of any diet. You don't have to be afraid of being hungry, and you don't have to eat like if you're hungry. This is probably going to sound a little bit, they're going to say, oh, Luis is telling things that are against a ketogenic diet, but some people experience hunger, some people don't. It's really like nothing, depends on the person. If you are already fat adapted, probably it's not a given, you're going to be less hungry than someone who is just starting a diet. And this is one of the benefits of doing a ketogenic diet or doing intermittent fasting, because your insulin is kept stable or low. You're probably getting less sugar crashes and less hunger pangs and whatever. But also it requires you to be customized to this. Even if you're doing a ketogenic diet, if you are used to eating 4 or 5 meals a day, you're going still to be hungry 4 or 5 times a day, even on a ketogenic diet. And this happens because your body gets used to being fed at certain times of a day. And what happens is that the body starts producing hormones to receive and to digest food in advance. And this is part of your circadian rhythm and circadian clock. Your body is, as I said before, gets used to that. Imagine as if your body was a factory and you have actual schedules to be receiving products. So you have all the workers lined up ready to receive the product. And then imagine that from having, 3 or 4 deliveries per day, you suddenly change them to 1 or 2 without actually noticing the workers. They're going to be there in line waiting to receive the product, and then nothing happens. They're just going to say, whatever, what happens? We were expecting a delivery at 3 o'clock and nothing came. What the fuck, man? So you're making them work for nothing. And it's not like you can actually tell your body, I'm not going to feed you and we're going to be doing intermittent fasting now. You cannot really tell your body and your hormones to be ready for that, but you can program them. And it takes a couple of days or maybe a week to your body to adapt to this new feeding schedule. So what happens now is that then you adapt to the new hour. And this is why you get always let's call it hungry at the same time, at the same days. Exactly. So probably people experience that they are used to eating probably at 12. And if they don't eat at 12, they probably get nervous or even get hunger pangs or whatever. It's not because your body actually needs food at that time. It's just because it's been accustomed to having food at that time. And it's actually started all the metabolic processes to digest food. Your stomach has blood in there, probably a little bit higher insulin because it's expecting food to be delivered there. But you can change it with a little bit of practice. So all this rambling is hunger is something that naturally comes with a diet, with a deficit, as well as probably being a little bit tired. What you can do is just stick to a safe deficit, which would be probably 15, 20, up to 25% of below your TDE, and how much depends on 2 things. 1, your body fat percentage, and 2, how fast or how hard you want to diet. It's not that it's going to be counterproductive or you're going to lower your metabolism or do damage. It's more so if you have a certain time Or of course, if you are you have a higher body fat percentage, you can do a higher deficit because you have more energy to be stored there that you can be used later on.
Yeah, that's a good point. I want to mention just one thing real fast, and it kind of touches on, you and Minnow talked about it a little bit, but I get so many clients nowadays that are afraid. If they feel hunger or they, are lethargic, they think they're messing up their metabolism, or they think that, something's wrong. But if you're dieting, like, one of the best, quote, skills you can have is the ability to be okay with hunger, the ability to kind of set with hunger, take a few breaths, relax. Like, we're so used to having food all the time whenever we need it. And so we've just been able to grab stuff if we feel even a little bit of hunger. But being okay with just feeling it, letting it go. Hunger really does come in waves. So, expect that. Again, fat loss is not fun necessarily. I mean, it is challenging, but you're not going to mess up your metabolism, nothing like that. No need to be afraid.
Exactly. And I'm going to take advantage of that now that you talked about this, because I'm going to repeat it until the internet understands this. Because this is a pet peeve of mine. There's no issue, and I'm not suggesting it. I'm going to explain it as best as I can. If you see people, I've seen it every day in various groups that saying that you cannot, as a woman, go below 1,200 calories. And this is a myth. It is context dependent. The magic number of 1,200 calories is pro science. It's just an average that was invented in a magazine or a forum. There's no scientific paper, and believe me, I looked for 3 days, and then I tried to look all the sources. There is no actual scientific paper that says that 1,200 is the least amount of a woman should be eating as to not have metabolic damage or whatever. What happens, or where this number is originated, is because there is an average size, height, and weight of a woman in America. And that is probably, 130 to 40 pounds. And the average American woman, believe me, correct me if I'm wrong, is probably 5'7" or so. So probably if you calculate a healthy body fat percentage for that woman with that build, probably they're going to end up, let's say, with 1,600 or 1,800 calories a day. Then you apply to them a 20% or 25% deficit, and it's going to end up in about 1,200 calories. And that is the logic of the 1,200 calories myth. If you go lower, what happens is, you're going to be hungry, probably because people are not knowledgeable in the ways of how to properly prepare nutrient-dense food. They're going to be under eating, especially in terms of macros and micros, and then they're going to probably not be healthy in the long term. But if you prepare a well-formulated diet that has enough protein, adequate energy, either from fats or carbs, and adequate micronutrient intake, there's no issue in going even lower than 1,000 calories, also depending on the build of the person. Let's say, take for example, someone that is a very small framed, a woman that is 5'2", and that she weighs 200 pounds with over 60% body fat. Well, of course, she's not going to be losing weight on 1,300 calories. She needs to go lower, either by reducing the caloric energy intake or by increasing energy expenditure, whatever you decide to do. But she's not going to be losing weight at 1,300 or 400 calories. And we see it every day with lots of our clients. But again, it's content dependent. You cannot take a number and apply it to everybody without really looking at the person in context, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, so in regards to, we actually talked about fat as being the lever, which is the one macro you should increase when you want to build muscle on keto. Then we maintain protein in adequate levels, which for actual hormone production and all the basic processes of the body, plus a little bit extra to actually build muscle, would be around 1 gram per lean body mass up to 1.2, which really more is probably not even necessary. It doesn't happen anything. What would you suggest, for example, in regards to, now that we touched on protein, is there an advantage, or talking about nutrient timing, where should one eat before or after, or really doesn't matter?
So I am not a huge fan of fasted training. I mean, again, the research on it is, it hasn't been done to my liking to make a definitive answer. But from most of what I've seen, I mean, if your goal is to get stronger, it's performance, it's, hopefully you're lifting to build muscle in some way. I think having protein at some point before your workout is helpful. It doesn't have to be right beforehand. Basically, what I like to see is some type of window where, depending on the meal you eat, if you eat a mixed meal before your workout, protein and fat, you can wait 6 hours after that meal and still have amino acids in your bloodstream. Now, if you have something like we recommend, usually like keto coffee or something like that, which is basically, a whey isolate, maybe some MCTs in your coffee. If you have that before your workout, that's going to digest a little bit faster. So I do like to see someone eating, maybe 3 to 4 hours after that. Again, you're still going to have amino acids in your bloodstream. And if you're later than that, it's not a huge issue. But I do like to see you sandwiching your workout with protein doses. Like I said, no more than about 6 hours, I would say. And I'm just not a huge fan of fasted workouts. I do like protein in there in some way.
Sure. So it brings us again to what we usually recommend on Ketogains, is the Ketogains coffee is a fast and convenient way to get, at least if you're not going to have a mixed meal, at least have some protein with a little bit of energy around your training. And for those that don't know what a Ketogains coffee is basically have a little bit of whey shake with a little bit of sodium, as we talked about, the importance of sodium, and some MCT or coconut oil for energy before training. And you can add a little bit extras to that, which could be probably creatine or probably citrulline malate or other compounds that are ergogenic and will help you with energy and focus during training. But more so, it brings us down to what you just said. You need a little bit of protein around training. It doesn't have to be exactly before or exactly after, just around a few hours before or after. The fat is so you have enough energy that is going to help you with training harder, and training harder will build more muscle. And that's it. So there's also a study that was recently talked, and Brad Schoenfeld was talking about it just today in regards what we always say, that intermittent fasting by itself may not be optimal for building muscle. It's a great tool, just as a ketogenic diet, to maintain a low body fat percentage all through the year, or if you want to do it for other reasons as a lifestyle, it's great, but it really may not be optimal towards muscle building. So probably if you want to build muscle, as we said, and you're a hard gainer or a skinny guy, why are you just eating once a day or 2 a day, right? Better to probably aim for 3 or 4 meals a day with adequate protein, let's say at least 20, 25 grams of protein, not the weight of the protein, but the protein content in a meal. So you're, as you said before, activating muscle protein synthesis all throughout the day. So you get enough leucine all throughout the day, and you get more, let's call it, chances to build muscle. Mm-hmm. Practically, it's we could call it a game of statistics, right? You have more opportunities during the day to be building muscle instead of being catabolic, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a lot of intermittent fasters that do the fasted training will talk about, well, workouts in and of themselves stimulate protein synthesis, and you do get this super compensation after workout where protein synthesis is even more elevated if you train fasted, but they don't take into consideration that your body also breaks down protein while you're working out. So I just don't think the difference makes up for that. And there haven't been studies done on keto adapted people, since they tend to spare some protein, possibly. There's kind of debate on that. But so it's hard to say for sure. I mean, if, like Lewis said, if your goal is fat loss, then, I mean, and you get up super early, you're not going to lose all your muscle. If you have to train fasted, it's not a huge deal. But it's also not a huge deal to whip up, some sodium in a whey shake as well. So
exactly. So take the lay down or the resume of what we just said is probably if you want to build muscle, the best would be at least 3 meals a day. It doesn't matter if one of those meals is a protein shake. As meals, we are talking about having 20-25 grams of protein. And then if you want to maintain or lose body fat, you could do it with probably 1 or even better 2 meals a day. Like 1 meal a day may not be optimal, and you have to be fairly advanced, fairly at your peak just to maintain or even build may not be optimal for lots of people or for the average folk, right?
Yeah. Personally, I never recommend 1 meal a day. I mean, unless it's like you're doing 1 fast a week or something like that, but continuously doing 1 meal a week, I'm just not a huge fan. If your goal is body composition performance, like you said, if it's strictly fat loss and you don't care about losing a little bit of muscle, 1 meal a day is fine. But yeah, for muscle building, 3 to 5 meals in general. And you can still fast. I mean, if you train later in the day, that's totally fine.
Again, the law of diminishing returns. People forget that when they're sleeping, they're fasting, and most people sleep for about 7-8 hours at night. So that's 8 hours of actually fasting. If you didn't really have such a big meal at night, you're not really going to hinder lipolysis. I've also read a recent study where it says that probably if you just want to have something at night and not very hungry, aim for casein or cottage cheese, which really doesn't inhibit lipolysis, but it also helps against some muscle breakdown. So you can have a little bit of the best of both worlds in this regards. You can keep up with your muscle building while sleeping, and also burn a little bit of extra fat. You have 8 hours of fat burning, then probably skip breakfast, the classical lean gains protocol, and then have your pre-workout shake just before you train like a monster, have a post-workout healthy meal, then probably have another meal, 6 or so in the evening. And if you want to try and casein before you sleep, that will be even a better option for those who want to gain as much muscle as possible. Of course, everything within your macros and calories, right?
Yep.
Perfect. So let's say, I think we touch on all the questions we have here regarding to macros and protein on training. So let's go to the last part, which would be hormones. We already touched on the part about the optimal range in body fat percentage for hormone regulation in regards to building muscle and losing body fat. But here's a question from someone in the group that they are asking about hormone imbalances affecting weight loss or rate of fat loss. So as we know, there are some maladies that may affect a little bit how much your metabolic rate, which are like PCOS or being insulin resistant, having lower testosterone. And so what would you suggest, or how do they affect actually metabolic rate in this regard? And what do you suggest to people that have these kind of maladies?
Well, first thing, I think it's important to understand that what you believe in your mind, has a big impact on your physiology. If you assume, I have PCOS, or I have, a sluggish thyroid, therefore this is going to be really hard for me, then it is going to be hard. But, you can just focus on yourself. You can still make progress. It is true that, with a lowered thyroid or with PCOS, fat loss is going to be a little more challenging, but it doesn't make that big of a difference. When they look at thyroid, and there's even some indications that, in keto, thyroid levels decrease a little bit. And that's just the only reason is because keto is a little bit more efficient. You use fat more efficiently. your body doesn't need to rev up metabolism as much to burn through glycogen, you know, things like that. So that may not be a bad thing. Like it, you know, a lot of people are afraid if their thyroid levels drop, but if you don't have symptoms, if you don't feel less sluggish, you know, make sure your electrolytes are obviously up to par and stuff like that, and give keto a try a while before you determine this. But don't just assume because your markers are off on blood work that you have some type of symptom because, or pathology, I mean, because this is, again, an average. You know, when they look at thyroid levels on a lab test, they're looking at average across a population. But as we've talked about, you know, there are outliers. There are some people that, you know, may have really high levels of thyroid, but they still feel normal. They don't have any hyperthyroid symptoms, something like that. So I'm kind of going off a little bit from the question, but I think it's important to understand that, not just for, you know, like hormone levels, but any type of study you're looking at. Like when studies talk about some variable, they're reporting the average across the population. So there's always outliers, and that's why we were talking about, you know, recording everything that's happening, you know, tracking how you respond to certain things like training and diet and stuff like that, because you may be different than what the average says.
Exactly.
So again, going back to the question, it can possibly make it a little more challenging, but again, just track your calories, track your weight, and if they aren't trending in the right direction, use those measurements and the scale as information. Like you probably need to decrease your intake a little bit more. And, you know, I would definitely talk with your doctor about all of this. You know, if you do have a thyroid condition or you're on thyroid medication, then be a little bit careful because, you know, we know if you go into a deficit, your thyroid's probably going to drop a little bit anyways. But if you have no thyroid pathology, then that level should return back to normal once you go back to maintenance.
Sure.
So it's normal for it to downregulate a little bit, and the same for testosterone in a male. You just don't want that to be down for too long.
Yeah, what I've seen with in this regard to persons is, first, don't assume that you have a metabolic illness. Like just because if you're not losing weight, instead of saying, oh, it's because I probably have, you know, PCOS or probably I have a hypothyroid or whatever, don't assume it. First, make sure you're actually like tracking your macros correctly, that you have set your actual deficit correctly, that you have set your macros correctly, because normally we've seen, you know, and probably you've seen these questions all over and over, is help, I'm not losing weight. Okay, what are your macros? How many calories are you eating? Oh, I'm not counting. Well, we don't know. We cannot help you. If you don't know, how do you expect us to know? Like, and then you get the usual response, eat more fat. How are you saying to eat more fat when you don't know what this person weighs, what this person looks like, what they are doing with their diet and macro-wise? So first, review what you are doing. Make sure that what you are doing is correctly. Again, if you have no idea, you can always ask in the group or even get in touch with us if you want us to take a look at you. We can always do a consultation, or we can take you as a client, whatever you decide. But the thing is, first you have to have a plan, and then you have to follow it. Don't expect to lose weight just because you are doing keto, or blame it all on hormones. Let's assume then that you actually are following a plan, that you have your macro set up correctly, and then it's not really working. The second thing that I would suggest is to review the actual food you are eating, because probably you're eating some foods that you are probably not calculating correctly, or have some things that you are not aware of, especially it happens with processed food. And you're probably not eating like nutrient-dense food that you should be eating. And it happens that sometimes when we are nutrient deficient on something, the body may actually retain water or whatever. There are lots of variables that come into play that affects the actual rate of weight loss. So first, again, I would review that you are in an actual deficit, then the macronutrition component, then the micronutrition, to see that everything there is aligned to your goals. And then the last thing I would review is hormones. And this is like when you have actually taken a close look at everything before, and then go and have a lab test done. Talk with your doctor, and of course, if you have like something in there that needs to be tweaked or medicated, go and do it. But again, even if you have that, it doesn't mean that you're not going to be losing weight if everything else is properly aligned, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, I do want to mention another couple variables just in general that some people overlook sometimes. And one of them, Adam Ali talked about on your last podcast, but is just something called NEAT, like how much you're actually moving around, things like that. Because when you start a diet and you lower your intake, you naturally tend to fidget less, you tend to move less. And that can really factor into your energy balance over time. So if you're eating less, if your calories really are down and you're not losing weight, make sure you're not moving a lot less as well, because that can factor.
Of course.
And then also just stress and sleep. Like those are two things that can have a big impact on just naturally how hungry you feel, how well you are partitioning your nutrients, how much water you're holding. So I think those three variables are also pretty important to consider.
Yeah, rest is quite important in regards that not so because you're tired, but if you start messing up with your circadian rhythms, and this is a very complex issue that has not been really studied so well. There are a lot of questions that are up in the air, but Bill Diakos has been studying and putting down research and his blogs lately about this. But let's put it out very quickly. If you start messing out with your circadian rhythm, you're going to probably have a little bit harder time in losing weight because your hormones are a little bit out of whack. Probably you're retaining water due to cortisol, whatever. So what you can do is de-stress a little bit. Strength training helps to manage stress. Try to take out distractions at night. Don't spend too much time looking at Facebook, whatever. Like turn out the lights, turn off TV, get a healthy sleep at healthy hours. So that's one of the suggestions that you can start doing. And also, it takes time. It doesn't happen immediately. Like if you had a really hectic lifestyle for the last 5-6 years, it's going to take a while before it rearranges itself once you start putting things in motion again, right?
Yep.
So I think that's basically it in regards to hormones. It's a very complicated issue. There's not so much information out there, but I think we laid out the important parts. Once that it's ketogenic diet, this is something that probably we're going to talk about later on. Down-regulates a little bit, but this doesn't mean that it's bad, your hormones. This is mostly because a ketogenic diet, as we have seen and research, is probably a little bit more efficient in some kinds of ways for your body. So your body doesn't need to be hyping up so much hormones in some regards. Doesn't mean that it's unhealthy. Even if you have a low thyroid due to a ketogenic diet, if you're asymptomatic with the effects of having hypothyroid, there's nothing to worry about. In the other sense, same happens with, just as we know right now that cholesterol is really not a founder. And having a high HDL, for example, doesn't mean that you're going to have a heart attack. More so, it's actually beneficial. So now we know that about cholesterol, but the hormone part is still being studied. We have no information now, but we do know from anecdotes and from other research that is being put out there that it's really nothing to worry about. It's practically normal. And basically, apart from that, what we just said, that if you actually do have hormones imbalances due to an illness, the best thing you can do first is to medicate it as with what your doctor suggests, and then to be more patient, right? It's not going to be as easier as for some people, but you still have to put it to work. Just be patient, stick to the plan, actually be more diligent in counting macros, try to eat around the same healthy foods the same days as to keep less variables in play, and just be consistent and patient.
Yep.
Perfect. So I think we pretty much covered everything. I don't know if you have anything else you want to say to the Keto Gainers, Zach?
No, I don't think so. I mean, again, I think Ketogains is an awesome community. Like, I'm excited to be a part of it. I think, if you guys have any questions at all, just post them up in the group. Like, everyone is super friendly. Tag one of the moderators if you're not getting a good answer, something like that. And we're always happy to help. Like, we really just want to, we don't think necessarily that keto is somehow this magic thing that's going to work for everyone. I think that's something that separates us apart. Like, we really want to just, if you want to try it, we want to make it work for you, or we want to help you figure out the best way to make it work for you. So, this was fun. I really appreciate you having me on, Liz.
Sure. We'll be making more of these podcasts or videos in the near future. Also, another announcement, we're opening right now our new bootcamp for September. We're taking applications as we speak. If you want to join, because it's a secret private group, we don't take first everybody. You have to actually apply and fill in a questionnaire. We have a beginner and intermediate bootcamp. It's a virtual bootcamp where we review your macros. We suggest your macros for your goals, which could be fat loss or muscle gain. We all do a well-structured program, which is done by Zach and I. We take a look for your actual lifting. You can send us form checks. Like I said, we have a secret Facebook group where only the people that apply and are enrolled in the program get advice. It's a great support group. It's great to learn a lot from us because we are always there answering all the questions you may have about diet, adherence, training, even biology and nutrients and everything. Any question you have, we are there for you. It's more so like a little learning process, not only to diet. So enrollment for the next session is already open, and we start on September 5th. So if you want to make a great change or jump start into keto, what we suggest is to join one of our boot camps. And we run those about every 2 months or so because they last 6 weeks, right?
Yep. Yeah, and they're a lot of fun. I mean, I'm not joking. I've done 3 or 4 of them now, and the results we are seeing are awesome. Like, it's really a lot of fun. Everyone is, helpful to each other and motivating. And so, yeah, I mean, I think they're pretty awesome.
Well, perfect. So again, we're having the Ketogains seminar on October, the 8th and 9th of October. So also be sure to look up on that. You can also go on ketogains.com and take a look at all the things that we're offering, or as well join our Facebook group. So Zach, thanks a lot for having the time to talk. We'll be doing more of these videos in the near future. Probably we'll be going to have Tyler or another of the mods soon, as well as some of the doctors or researchers that are doing ketogenic diets or studying ketogenic diets in the future. So thank you guys. Thanks for tuning in, and see you later.
See you later.
Bye.